All right, just stop.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay,
We resumed this and we're good to go.
okay. Is it recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome into the Wolverine Recruiting Show. I'm your host, EJ Holland, along with my co pilot, Tim Vergeese. We're going to hit on some major news, including Dante Moore. But before we do, I want to invite you guys to purchase the recruiting edition of the Wolverine magazine, now available for just $8 on the WolverineOnDemand.com. If you go there, you can just purchase the individual copy. You can also sign up for a yearly membership, which includes 12 individual issues. We produce one every month. And yeah, it's a great magazine. It's loaded with 100 pages full of features and breakdowns of Michigan's 2022 recruiting class. So make sure to get your copy now at the Wolverine on Demand, only while supplies last. Let's go ahead and get into this week's news. Big topic of conversation is Dante Moore, the top 100 quarterback out of Detroit King, a guy that I'm very close to. Prediction went in for him this week to land at Notre Dame. Obviously, that created a lot of question marks and a little bit of panic, but I think you have to kind of just take it with a grain of salt. You see the Moore pick, it was only, I believe, a 55% confidence level at for him to land at Notre Dame. Look, that pick didn't really come with any new intel or anything. It was a 55% pick, which, I mean, honestly, for any guys that Michigan's like in the top three with, I could put in a pick for 55%. So whenever I make picks on this side, I make sure to always have some intel behind it. So I'm not putting too much stock into it right now, but I'm also not dismissing where Notre Dame stands. If Dante Moore had to pick a school today, I would not be surprised if it is Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's done a fantastic job recruiting him. They are selling him on the fact that he can come in and play right away. He has a great relationship with Tommy Rees, their offensive coordinator slash quarterbacks coach. And then I think Michigan was hurt a little bit by the Jim Harbaugh situation. I know Dante Moore was keeping really close tabs on that. But with all of that said, it's still early. Even though quarterbacks make decisions earlier than most, Dante is a guy that wants to make visits throughout this spring. So I think the spring is really going to shape his recruitment. I think it's too early to make a prediction right now. He wants to get back to Michigan. He wants to get back to Notre Dame. He wants to get back to Michigan State. He wants to get back to Penn State. He wants to get back to Miami. So he wants to make all these visits. He wants to see Oregon. Like, they're just so many schools he wants to see. Quietly likes Florida State. Like, there are just a lot of schools that he wants to see. He wants to get second looks at. So he doesn't have an exact decision timeline. So as it stands right now, I mean, Dante's kind of been taking a little bit of a break from recruiting with the dead period ongoing. As we get into March and he sets visits, then I think we'll know a lot more and we'll have better intel to base our predictions off of. Right now, I don't have a prediction in for Dante Moore. Again, I still think Michigan is in a very good spot. I think they did lose a little bit of momentum with the changes this offseason and the Harbaugh situation, but no reason why the Wolverines can't get back in it with him. He has a good personal relationship with Jim Harbaugh, who actually offered him as a middle schooler. Ron Bellamy has known him for a long time and is heavily involved as his area recruiter. Matt Weiss isn't known as a relationship builder, but I know Dante really loves his football acumen and his IQ and the way he's kind of broken down some film with him. So, yeah, again, I'm see Notre Dame as a very, very, very real threat. But I think right now there's still a ways to go with Dante Moore. Tim, you were actually in San Antonio and talked to Dante a little bit when you were at the All American Bowl Combine. What were kind of your impressions from just getting some quotes from him? What do you think about his recruitment?
Saw Dante Moore at the All American Combine. He was just kind of hanging out there, but I saw him again a couple of weeks later at the Battle Miami tournament playing with Max X. He was actually on that same weekend. He made ahead and made a visit to Miami. They kind of had their elite junior day that weekend. Conveniently, the same weekend as teams across the country flew down to the city for a 7-on-7 tournament. Pure coincidence. But I think Miami's made a good impression there. Obviously, I think Michigan and Notre Dame are the two schools out ahead early. I think Penn State's obviously still in there. Michigan State's still in there. But I just get the impression he's still weighing out all of his options. But for me, it's one thing it's going to come down to. I think is going to be the schools that were in there the entire time. He's talked to EJ and I about wanting to do somewhat of a national tour this summer. About getting to see some schools out west, getting to see some schools down south. Getting to see some of these new schools that are in his recruitment. But Michigan and Notre Dame, Penn State, those three teams have been there the entire time. You could argue with Josh Gaddis moving down Miami. You could say Miami's been in there for a long time as well. I think in the end it does come down to the Midwest schools, and I think it's way too early to put in a prediction one way or another because I think he's got some time before he wants to make a decision. I think he wants to be the guy that helps build the class, but he also wants to make sure he's making the right decision for himself. Which is why I think you're going to see him play this process out longer than you would see most quarterbacks as we get down into the last the back, not even the back stretch, but it's like we're in the final year of these 2023 recruitments, and he still doesn't have a decision made yet. It doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon. So we'll just kind of find out and kind of see what he ends up doing. I just think it's way too wide open at this point to put a prediction in one way or the other.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the other note is Michigan realizes that it's going to be a very heated battle, but they haven't gotten to the point where they started to recruit other quarterbacks. He's still the guy in 2023. The only other active quarterback that they're pursuing is Arch Manning, who's a long shot, who's likely to stay south. So I think right now Michigan is still full steam ahead with Dante Moore. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about Michigan's shakeup in the recruiting department. Director of recruiting, Aashon Larkins, has left the program. He's now an analyst at Ole Miss. He was a guy that was really heavily involved with some Southern targets. He had some ties to Alabama. He was trying to lead that Alabama to Michigan charge. Tim, you've been down in the South quite a bit. I know you were kind of on top of that Larkins news. What was your reaction to Larkins leaving and how that'll affect Michigan moving forward?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to kind of see him move. We had talked about the staff shuffling and kind of what Michigan's trying to do in their recruiting department, and you kind of figured when Courtney Morgan left, they try and keep the rest of the staff intact and build around them. Aashon kind of being the guy as the director of recruiting. So to see him leave is a little surprising, but I don't blame not that I don't blame him, but he's going to Ole Miss. That's a program where he's got a lot of familiarity. It's down south. Like I said, he's been involved with a lot of underclassmen down south. And it's a little easier to recruit guys down there. But that being said, I mean, I will say, talking to some of the 24s he was involved with, one even outright told me that when his conversations with Larkins were in December and January, where Larkins saying, "Hey, if I were to go somewhere else," he'd mentioned Clemson. He's like, "If I were to go to Clemson, I would still tell you to go to Michigan."
Oh, that's good. I thought it was going on another
Oh,
direction.
no. Sorry, but that's exactly what he said. Yeah, like he even on his way out, he didn't burn any bridges. It doesn't hurt Michigan a whole lot with some guys as long as communication sticks up, and that's one thing that Michigan will have to be a little proactive about as they build out this recruiting department. And they're very focused on 23, but Larkins was very keyed in on 24 and 25s. I actually had a couple of 24s reach out to me and be like, "Hey, Michigan hasn't reached out since my guy Larkins left." They do want to hear from Michigan. They are very interested in Michigan, but Michigan's going to have to be proactive of picking up the slack on where, or just picking up the baton where Larkins left off, and he did leave Michigan with in good standing with a couple guys. It just communication absolutely cannot drop off at this point because Michigan does have some legit momentum with some top guys down south. I've mentioned a couple on the board. They got in early with KJ Bolden, the number 3 prospect in the 24 class. Jalen Mbakwe from Alabama. He's a top two-way player in the country. That's a key Michigan target. Guys like that down in Florida, guys in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, just some Southern guys that he had Michigan in a good spot with that he's probably going to be recruiting to Ole Miss now. And so, Michigan has to stay on top of it to avoid losing any momentum there.
Yeah, it's a good note on Larkins. I feel like I'm just scarred from the Josh Gaddis leaving message where he kind of said he was unappreciated. I was like, oh no, we're going down another similar route. But good on Larkins for going out with class. I think it's interesting with Michigan's recruiting department as a whole. You promoted Larkins to that position. He's obviously gone. You had Courtney Morgan leave over to Washington. You had a key analyst, Ryan Osborne, head off to the Ravens. You had some other analysts depart as well, GAs. You had Newsome move up from GA to tight end. So a lot of shifting in guys that are involved in the recruiting department or just in the recruiting sphere of Michigan. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of rebuild that. They brought in Albert Karshnia, who's worked with Jim Harbaugh in the past. They still have Christina DeRuiter handling on-campus recruiting, but they have some spots to fill. So it'll be interesting to see, how Michigan decides to fill those. I know Jim Harbaugh was adamant in his contract negotiations about expanding the recruiting department. I've always been, banging that drum that Michigan needs to add more guys to be on the level of their fellow blue bloods. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Looking ahead, we are going to be back on the road this weekend. Tim is going to be in Houston and then heading to Atlanta for the Under Armour camp. I will be making the trip down to Tennessee to see some guys down there in the national 7-on-7 tournament. But we were back on the road this weekend. Tim, you more so than I kind of had the week off a little bit and stayed in Chicago. You were in Houston for the National Shock Doctor tournament where you saw a number of Michigan targets. What were some of your key takeaways from the weekend?
Yeah, solid weekend. Got to see some guys. Some guys from down south across the country. The Gas Crew Elite came down. They're the top team in Alabama. Got to catch up with Dakari Nelson. He's a top Michigan target at the safety position. Michigan's still doing pretty well there. Ron Bellamy leaving switching from coaching wide receivers or coaching safeties to wide receivers has pretty much allowed Steve Klinkskill to take over that recruitment. Communications barely dropped off there. Nelson communicates on a pretty frequent basis with Klinkskill, and Jim Harbaugh himself is actually taking on this recruitment as well. Talking to Nelson, I put up an article yesterday on the Wolverine, but talking to Nelson, he told me over the weekend that when it comes down to it, at this point in his recruitment, it's going to be the schools that have been communicating with him and his family on a consistent basis for a prolonged time. And the communication has to be about more than football. It has to talk about football, life after football. There has to be genuine care from the staff. And he did mention that Jim Harbaugh has done a great job of doing that. His conversations with Harbaugh go beyond football. He'll check in with him on school, on life, on how Nelson's doing in other sports, how 7-on-7's going. Harbaugh and Harbaugh and Klinkskill are doing a good job there. I'm a little worried about Clemson in that recruitment, as I'm also worried about Penn State there. Nelson is from Selma, Alabama. It's somewhat of a smaller town in Alabama. Clemson's kind of more of what he's more familiar with. I think Ann Arbor or even State College is going to be a bit of a change of pace for him. So we'll kind of see. I think him getting back up to campus is going to be important, and he is planning on making it up to Michigan for a spring practice or two, as he said. So it would be good to see him at least return more than once this offseason to come see Michigan. Another guy I saw that I came away a little impressed with was Kylan Jackson out of Zachary, powerhouse school out in Louisiana. He plans to visit Michigan next month. He's playing the process out. Doesn't really have a timeline for a decision at the moment, but Michigan's in a good spot there. Ron Bellamy, while he's not as involved anymore in Nelson's recruitment, because he is from Louisiana, he is staying in contact with Jackson. So this is going to be a Klinkskill and Bellamy recruitment. I think Michigan really does have a chance there. It's going to be key on getting him up for an official visit. He plans to take those in the summer. And so if Michigan get him out on an official visit, I think they have a much stronger chance there than at once previously thought. And then a couple other standouts from the weekend. His teammate Jordan Matthews, On3 Sam Spiegelman actually caught up with Matthews a couple of weeks ago. And at the time, it didn't seem like Michigan was really involved just based on Sam's intel. But after talking to Matthews, Clinkscale's still in communication. Michigan is still in contact. They just seem to be more on the outside looking in, with schools like LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, kind of leading the way out right now. Michigan is going to try and get him up on campus this offseason. They absolutely should. I think a visit would go a long way there, just like with a lot of guys. That's the big thing about Michigan that I've learned, in the last couple months on the beat is, you never count on the recruitment once those guys get on campus. Once those guys get on campus, things change pretty quick. That's just the kind of impact Michigan's kind of facilities, the campus, Ann Arbor kind of has on these guys. So getting them on campus is going to be key. And then two other like real big things that stood out from the weekend. I caught up with two twins that Michigan recently offered, Andrew and Michael Harris, out of Altamonte Springs, Lake Brantley down in Florida. Michigan very recently offered. The Twins have a lot of interest in Michigan. Speak very highly of the program. Both have a good relationship with George Hilo, and Michigan's recruited twins before. A lot of schools, we've seen a couple of twins come up the last couple of cycles, and these are Andrew and Michael are a true package deal. They're going to the same college. They have the same top schools list. They want to play the same role. Andrew's ranked about a little over 100 spots higher than Michael. He's got some legit track times for a linebacker. I think he's running like 10.7 in the 100-meter, which is kind of crazy. And so he is I guess of the two, he is the catch. But, both are very solid. And I think, if Michigan's looking to pair another linebacker or two linebackers with Braylon Wilson, I don't think Andrew and Michael are very bad options at all. Michigan State, UCF, Auburn are some of the other schools involved in that recruitment. So getting them on campus is going to be key. They do plan on visiting next month. So we're just going to have to figure out and see when they get up there. And then the last guy from the weekend that, actually there's two here, two that really stood out to me. Braylon James. So an interesting note on him. Josh Gaddis we've talked about Josh Gaddis as a recruiter. Josh Gaddis actually did a really good job with Braylon. Braylon outright told me on the record a couple of weeks ago, Michigan led. And I heard from some sources over the weekend that said he was even inching towards like making a decision back in January/early Feb. And my belief is if he were to make that commitment, it would have been Michigan. With Gaddis leaving, obviously there was a little drop off in communication, but Bellamy likes him. He's taking over as wide receivers coach, and I expect communication to kind of pick up. And James, at this point, Notre Dame seems to lead for James, but if Michigan gets back in contact and is able to still sell him on everything that Ann Arbor and Michigan has to offer, and he's able to make an official visit this offseason, this is a recruitment I think Michigan can win. It's just going to have to be about holding off schools like Notre Dame and Stanford, and to a lesser extent in-state schools like Texas and Texas A&M. And then one other guy that kind of stood out from the weekend was Braylon Rogers out of LaGrange. He's a number 42 player in the On3 consensus. He does plan to visit this spring, just doesn't have a date in mind yet. Michigan does see, I've mentioned it before, Michigan sees Rogers as a two-way player, and that really stands out to him. That's an option. He's looking to play at the next level. Michigan's actually recruiting him and Dalton Brooks to kind of be somewhat two-way players in their system. Both guys from Texas, both from not necessarily middle of nowhere. Dalton more than Bravion's from the middle of nowhere, but they're from smaller schools in Texas. So both those guys can be pulled out of the state. Bravion's looking at schools like USC, Alabama, and TCU. So in-state schools like Texas and Texas A&M aren't huge factors. Rogers has actually visited Texas 5 times, but everyone I've talked to on the Texas side and sources I've talked to don't believe he ends up at Texas when it's all said and done. So Michigan can get him on campus and can make some stuff happen. I think you could see some movement there for sure.
Awesome. Well, Tim had a ton from the road. I don't have as much. I was just here in Chicago. Actually, just made the short drive over to the suburbs to see CJ Carr throw. Now, CJ is a Michigan kid, but he actually is training with JJ McCarthy's trainer, Greg Holcomb, out here in the Chicago area. So I had a chance to see his throwing session on Friday. And look, CJ is a guy that obviously has the name. The Carr name means a lot around Michigan circles. Lloyd Carr is his grandfather. His father played quarterback at Michigan. He has many family members that have gone to Michigan. So again, it means a lot. But he's more than just a name. I mean, he's a legit prospect. He's a top 150 level prospect, in my opinion. His floor is tremendous. Obviously, he's been around the game forever through his family ties. But he has a really good arm. He's accurate. He's poised. He has really good footwork. He's a guy that has built up his frame. I think he just checks a lot of boxes. He's underrated as an athlete. He looks comfortable rolling out left, rolling out right, just on the move. If you watch his tape, I mean, he's not a statue in the pocket at all. He's a guy that can move around. He's not JJ. He's not that elusive, quick type guy. But he does have some escapability to him. And I think he's getting better and better at those off-platform throws from working with Holcomb. And I think he's really tightening up all his mechanics and his footwork. So CJ's a legit prospect. If Michigan does miss out on Dante Moore, who we talked about earlier, they'll have to scramble a little bit for 2023. And I think they'll take two in 2024. And I think they're banking on getting CJ Carr with his connections. But he did tell me his recruitment's going to be pretty open. He's not going to shut it down and just commit to Michigan early. He wants to make a decision next spring. So he's still a year out from maybe making a decision. He wants to see other schools. He actually told me he's planning a little bit of a southern swing to see Alabama, Georgia, which recently offered, and Texas. Michigan State is making a hard push, Penn State, Notre Dame, so the Midwest schools as well. But yeah, I mean, Michigan's going to be hard to beat with just his ties to the program. I think he's a really good looking prospect, and I'm excited to see CJ yet again this weekend. So I'll have a chance to see CJ in back-to-back weekends. But that was my time on the road. That is our time on the show. We appreciate you guys for joining. If you want more quality Michigan recruiting content, make sure to subscribe to the Wolverine for $1 today. Just head over to wolverine.com, click the subscribe button. It is exactly $1.